Hey everyone, Encolly here, welcome back to a new showcase video. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a massive chorus fruit farm for 1.16. This farm is so huge, but for good reason, as it produces just over 30,000 chorus plants and flowers an hour. These can be used for a lot of things, such as enrods and purpur blocks. The farm is so big because chorus plants can't be sped up by traditional means, such as using bone meal or zero ticks, so we must let it grow naturally. The average chorus flower takes about 15 minutes to reach its maximum age. During this time, the player can ride around in a minecart and continually place down other chorus flowers. The minecart track is about 6,000 blocks long and takes 13 minutes to loop all the way around, with the other 2 minutes being taken up by chorus flower replenishing stations and minecart synchronization systems. To get a better understanding of how this farm works, let's take a look at just one module. Here, the player rides around in a minecart and places down chorus fruit on top of endstone. As the player rides the whole loop, the chorus plant grows. By the time the player circles back around, the chorus plant has fully grown and is ready to be harvested. The player then activates a detector rail, which then retracts a piston, which in turn breaks the chorus plant. TNT is also used to break the top of the plant, as just breaking from the bottom doesn't drop a chorus flower, but blowing it up does. The endstone is retracted for as long as possible, so items can drop down and flow into the collection system. The endstone then gets pushed back up just before the player becomes perpendicular to it. Then the player can place down another chorus flower and the process begins again. Items that drop on the sides are collected with hopper minecarts. Do note that there are some losses that fall on the edges here. If they drop from a very high point, sometimes they take so long to fall down that the endstone gets pushed back up before they can be pushed away. A command block is also used just to summon TNT, as to hook this up, I would need a whole nother system to synchronize it. So you may ask, how do we sync up the TNT with the minecart below? Well, we just use another minecart traveling the same distance as the minecart below, which activates TNT jupers with detector rails. It's a quite simple idea. Just replicate whatever's on bottom, up top. But there are a few problems that arise from this fix. One being that a minecart with a passenger travels faster over rails than a minecart without a passenger. So over time, the passenger minecart will travel a slightly further distance than the one without a passenger. This problem can be fixed by using an AND gate to resynchronize both minecarts. This gate pretty much just requires both minecarts to activate 2 inputs. So there's one input down here, so this triggers that, which turns this torch off, and this torch is still on because the input all the way up here, is still on. So if I chuck a minecart on here, it will eventually send a signal all the way down, and then it will release this latch, which then sends the minecart on its way. And that minecart also got released. So this pretty much prevents any, desynchronization over time. Of course, that minecart down there is client side when a player gets in it, and the minecart up there isn't, so that can also cause some deviances over time. And it just fixes a lot of problems and makes the system a lot more reliable. As if the TNT was to desynchronize with the player, the TNT will be destroying new chorus plants before they've grown to full height, which would just kill the rates and would break the farm, as if a chorus plant hasn't grown to full height, it might not be able to give back enough chorus flowers for the player to place down. So this can have a massive effect. The other problem is that the player needs to restock on chorus plants every 60 endstone blocks, which is 1 trip up and then 1 trip back. Obviously, as the player stops here, the minecart up top would also keep going, while the player is stuck here, and then that will cause desynchronization. So, we need to stop the minecart up there for the same amount of time as it stopped down here. Now, this seems tricky at first, as like, how do you know when the player runs out of chorus plants? But this distance, as I said before, is 60 blocks. If we put 60 chorus plants in there, obviously that's been taken because the minecart's already gone through here. But say if the minecart comes here, this dispenses out 60 chorus flowers. If I was riding in here, I'll pick them up. A minecart all the way up there also activates a dispenser, which shoots out 60 items into a hopper, and then a comparator measures that dispenser or dropper and then once the dropper is empty, it then activates or retracts this piston, which allows the minecart to go free. The circuit's pretty much identical on both sides, and it just keeps both of the minecarts synced up. The fuse of the TNT also has to be considered. The minecart up top is about 50 blocks ahead, as the TNT takes 4 seconds to explode once ignited. And there is also needs to be a bit of time for the items to drop down and be collected. So how do the chorus flowers get stacked into groups of 60? Well, it all begins here, at the storage system. Here, items that are harvested from the farm flow into here, and chorus flowers are sorted out and dispensed. Then they travel along this extremely long water stream, all the way over to this circuit. Here, items go into a hopper, which once it reaches a certain threshold, it pushes over a hopper minecart, which then, with the help of a pulse extender, collects exactly 60 items. Let's see if this happens. Here we go. So it'll collect 60 items, hoppers below will then suck out those items and dispense it, and then over here it groups them into groups of 60, and then they get dropped down, shot up a water elevator, and then along this water stream. So pretty much stacks of 60 get shot up an elevator, down here, and then get picked up by a hopper. Once this hopper has an item in it, it gets locked, and then it puts all its items into this dropper. And say I was to come around and activate this. So I'm using the farm. I'll just wait till that dropper fills up first. Okay, so I'm using the farm, right, placing chorus flowers. I ran out of chorus flowers. I come over here, and then this is just going to restock me with 60 flowers. Once this dropper is empty, that hopper up there will then declog, so then stacks can come around and refill it again. So this pretty much dispenses exactly 60 into your inventory. And then as you can see, now that block is retracted, and if we get another stack, there we go, you'll see it'll then shut again, and then this hopper will be locked, and we'll get 60 items back in here, like that. So it's a pretty cool system. And then any excess chorus flowers, as you can see here, all of these are full. I didn't align it, but you get the idea. There you go, you just saw one. That's a stack of excess flowers, which are then just transported way back here into the storage system for permanent storage or whatever. So you get a few drops from this farm. You get about 30 to 34,000 an hour, and the farm runs at a pretty stable TPS. It's pretty high, but I mean it's a massive farm. Like, you probably wouldn't want to run more than one of these on a server. And the main problem I have with this farm is all the TNT jupers. I'm probably going to get a lot of comments saying that I've used way too many, but I messed around with a lot of ideas, ways to break the chorus plants. You can use snowballs, I heard, to break chorus flowers, and they actually drop the item. So if I get a chorus flower here, I didn't get it, and then I plant one, you can actually break it with the snowball. I have the random tick speed up just so I can demonstrate stuff in real time. It actually breaks off the chorus flower, so you could use snow golems or whatever to actually hit the chorus flowers. But of course, if you had a snow golem that could only hit from like 1 degree of movement, you know, you'd very rarely actually come across a chorus flower, and you'd need a lot of snow golems, and it would just be pretty inefficient and even more laggy with all the snow golems and the skeletons that they'll be shooting at. You can also use like arrows and maybe even firework rockets. I don't know why there's 2 minecarts there, that's weird. Yes, there's some alternatives to TNT. An idea that did hit me was I could use a TNT flying machine to like dupe TNT and then like go back and forth and then break the chorus plants. But you travel 8 blocks a second on minecart rails, and the fastest flying machine is like no quicker than 6 blocks per second. So nowhere near 8. So that idea didn't work. I had another idea where it was just one long line, so instead of it snaking, it just went 6,000 blocks one way, or 3,000 blocks one way, and then 3,000 back. This is pretty much so that you only load like a really small portion of the farm. Like, you only load whatever it is, 256 blocks of the farm at one time, and that just saves a lot on lag. But of course, if you're only loading 256 blocks of the farm, the chorus plants in unloaded chunks won't be growing. And even ones, you know, past 128 blocks around you also won't be growing because of the random tick range. So yeah, I did try that idea and I got really excited, but it's obviously not viable. This here was the first design that I had. Pretty much my main goal was to minimize the amount of time that the player spends not placing chorus flowers. So if you could place one, you know, every game tick or every 4 game ticks, if you're not using an auto clicker, you would end up with, you know, 72,000 chorus plants, like a whole one of these per hour. And one of these averages out to be about like 20 items per plant. So, you know, 20,000 times 72,000 is a pretty large number, like over 1 million. So I'm like, if I make a piston bolt and I place one every game tick, I'm gonna end up with a crazy farm. But this led to a few problems, mainly being the collection system. Like, you need to have water at this level down here. You can't have it up here because then it will break this plant. And of course I can't have water here because I've got the piston bolt. So one idea that I had is I could drop the piston bolt down like 2 levels, and I could have a double strider, and I could ride the top of the second strider. And what this would allow me to do, is I can just demonstrate it. Here the idea would pretty much be to have the whole piston bolt be situated 2 blocks below, which would allow you to have the water stream above the piston bolt, because in this case it's at the same level as the piston bolt. I tried some waterproof methods with like observers, but they didn't work. As like, you know, you were literally at eye height with the water and you couldn't place it. But an idea like this with the striders below would work, but in the end it didn't really function because of lag. And one big problem is that to place, you know, 72,000 chorus plants an hour situated the efficient 6 or so blocks apart, it would take up an area about 20 times the size of this. And of course that would be out of the random tick range, so the whole idea would just be useless. And imagine this except 20 times bigger. It would just be lagging the hell out of everything. So I'm like, you know, if I'm restricted to this size, doesn't really matter how fast I'm going in between, there's a certain threshold which I can't breach. So yeah, these are some early game designs where I would like place a block against trapdoors before I realized I could just aim at the ground, which allowed me to get rid of the trapdoors. Yeah, they were pretty old designs. I've been working on this farm for a while. Another design I had is that if you activate the endstone block earlier, it allows more time for items to flow over the top, so you end up with less losses. But the problem with this is that it wouldn't fit, because you have to activate, you know, it 4 blocks away. You would have 4 other modules overlapping, and there just isn't enough room for that in this little area. You could drop this water stream all the way down, so you could drop that down a lot, and then that would maybe give you enough space for it. But I decided against it because I'm lazy. And I really wanted to get a video out, as it's been like 2 months, and this idea just would have taken forever. And, you know, it just gives me an excuse to maybe work on a second chorus farm that makes over